Developing right now, growing talk in Hollywood that South Park could be planning a Harry and Meghan sequel.
We want privacy! We want privacy!
Oh, we say that. We say that. We all think that.
Oh, goodness me. I would be very excited about this. Here's the headline in the Mail. Calls for South Park to take a second bite out of Harry and Meghan. New respect our pregnancy joke appears online after the Duchess's latest social media posts.
Have you ever seen that video?
No.
Pull that video up, because it's one of my favorite.
Who's filming this?
Meghan Markle's legal team tried to kill this episode before sunrise. They failed, and now the internet won't stop talking about what South Park just exposed. I need you to understand something right now. What dropped in the early hours of this morning isn't just another celebrity roast.
Sue a cartoon, it's satire, it is what it is. South Park has done episodes on the royal family, on the royal wedding of Kate and William, for instance, so it's not something that they would be able to sue about. And I genuinely just don't believe it, really.
What the f*** is going on with Harry?
How dare you?
I'll say whatever I want. You're in my house now.
You want a piece of me?
I will f*** you up, girlie.
The focus is starting to shift off of me.
This is South Park systematically dismantling the entire foundation of Meghan Markle's public image. And the fallout is already tearing through Hollywood like wildfire. Within 6 hours of this episode appearing online, over 200,000 social media posts exploded across every platform. Entertainment insiders are going silent. Former supporters seem unusually quiet. And sources close to Meghan claim she's absolutely furious about what just aired.
These two are not sincere people. They say that they want their privacy while going on every television show, writing books, doing 6 hours of Netflix. They're not very likable, and people are tired.
But here's what makes this different from every other South Park takedown. They didn't just mock her. They exposed something that millions of people have been quietly thinking for years, but couldn't quite put into words. And now that it's been animated, satirized, and thrown into the spotlight, there's no going back. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this single episode has royal experts stunned, why crisis management teams are working overtime, and why even Meghan's most loyal defenders are struggling to find the right response.
Tomorrow night, a big swathe of the world media will be showing you the highlights of a brand new episode of South Park, which goes to air middle of the day tomorrow in the US.
It's so quiet and empty here. If we moved her, then people would think we're really serious about wanting to be normal. It does seem perfect, doesn't it?
So let's talk about what actually happened, because the reality is somehow even more dramatic than you're imagining. Here's where things get suspicious right from the start. This episode, titled Respect Our Authenticity, wasn't on any advanced schedule. No press releases, no promotional tweets, no countdown timers. It just appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the night. If you know South Park, you know Trey Parker and Matt Stone work dangerously close to deadlines. But this was different. Multiple entertainment reporters have said off the record that this felt intentional. Like they were trying to avoid interference before the episode could hit the internet.
I want to discuss South Park, and it's the episode everyone's talking about. It went to air overnight in the US. It was an absolute roasting.
Your millions from Netflix for no one knows what.
Put it with the rest of them.
One anonymous source who works in comedy television put it bluntly. It's like they knew exactly what kind of firestorm this would create and wanted to make sure it dropped before anyone could stop it. And they were right to be concerned. Within hours, clips were flooding Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit. By breakfast time on the East Coast, the episode was trending worldwide. And rumor has it that Meghan's team was already in emergency meetings, trying to figure out how to contain the damage. But what could possibly be in this episode that required this kind of stealth release? What did South Park create that was so explosive it allegedly needed to be hidden until the last possible moment? To understand that, we need to rewind a few months to the video that started everything. Remember that clip from a few months back? Meghan, heavily pregnant, dancing in what looked like a hospital setting while Harry watched from the sidelines. It was supposed to be heartwarming, an intimate glimpse into their life during pregnancy. Except, the internet immediately noticed something off.
I think he goes on to say, so you wrote a book talking about your family. Does that not make you a journalist too? And then they kind of stare at each other like dumbfounded.
The lighting was too perfect. The camera angles were too professional. The movements seemed choreographed. And the biggest question everyone kept asking Why was someone filming this supposedly private moment with this level of production quality? Social media lit up with side-by-side comparisons, memes, and pointed questions about authenticity. That single video became the perfect encapsulation of everything critics had been saying for years. A supposedly candid moment that somehow looked like it had a full production team behind it. And according to sources familiar with the episode, that contradiction became the seed for South Park's most ruthless takedown yet. Let me be crystal clear about what we're discussing here. This is satire from an animated comedy show, not investigative journalism. South Park exaggerates and distorts for comedic effect. But what they're satirizing is based on public perception that already exists. The episode reportedly centers on a character obviously meant to be Meghan, who is absolutely obsessed with appearing authentic. But here's the twist that makes it devastating. She's not trying to actually be authentic. She's trying to perform authenticity with the same meticulous planning you'd see in a Hollywood blockbuster. According to viewers who've seen the episode, there's a scene where the Meghan character is in a meeting with consultants analyzing metrics. What types of authentic moments get the most engagement? Which emotional beats resonate with which demographics? How can we optimize the performance of authenticity? One particularly brutal sequence shows her shouting more genuine, more authentic, while simultaneously adjusting lighting angles, camera positions, and the exact timing of when she should laugh or look thoughtful. There's apparently a running gag where every single time she says the word authentic, another piece of production equipment appears in the shot. She starts in a simple room with one camera, but by her 10th speech about authenticity, it looks like a full Hollywood soundstage with boom mics, lighting rigs, and an entire film crew. The satire is obvious. The more she talks about being real, the more constructed everything becomes. It's the contradiction made visual in the most ridiculous way possible. But if you think that's harsh, wait until you hear about what happens when Cartman gets involved. According to multiple descriptions, Cartman hijacks the production and starts adding increasingly absurd elements. Fireworks in hospital hallways, choreographed dance numbers, special effects that would make Marvel jealous, all while the Meghan character keeps insisting everything is still completely authentic and real. The chaos builds until you reach the moment that's generated more clips and reactions than anything else in the episode. During an elaborate dance sequence meant to recreate that viral pregnancy video, something happens that stopped viewers mid-scroll. The character's pregnancy bump reportedly slips out of position and hits the floor, revealing it as a prop rather than a real pregnancy. Now stop. I need to be absolutely clear here. I am not suggesting Meghan Markle faked any pregnancy. That would be absurd and completely unfounded. The pregnancies were real, the children exist, and anyone suggesting otherwise is trafficking in baseless conspiracy theories. What matters is the metaphor South Park is using. They're not making a literal claim about pregnancy. They're making a point about performance versus reality, about the gap between what's presented to the public and what might be happening behind the scenes. It's a visual metaphor taken to the most extreme, shocking conclusion possible. And whether you think that metaphor crosses a line or not, you can't deny it's effective at making people talk. Within hours of this scene spreading across social media, sources in the entertainment industry started reporting that Meghan's team was completely blindsided. Emergency conference calls, legal discussions, everything you'd expect when a celebrity feels they've been unfairly targeted. One source who works in crisis management told an industry podcast, they had no idea it would go this far. There were allegedly late-night calls trying to figure out if anything could be done to limit the episode's reach or prevent future airings. Here's the irony that makes this whole situation even more interesting. If those reports are true, if there really were attempts to suppress or control the episode, that would be doing exactly what South Park is mocking. The entire premise of their satire is about the need to control narratives. Trying to stop the episode proves their point more effectively than any joke they could write. There's actually a golden rule in crisis management. When South Park targets you, the worst thing you can do is fight back publicly, because they thrive on that kind of response. Give them ammunition, and they'll reload for an even more brutal second round. The smart play is to stay quiet, let the news cycle move on, and come back later with actions rather than words. But if rumors are accurate, that's not the approach being taken here. And while those alleged behind-the-scenes discussions were happening, something else was occurring that was completely outside anyone's control. The internet was spreading this story absolutely everywhere. The numbers are honestly hard to believe. Within 12 hours, over 200,000 posts across all major platforms. Hashtags trending not just in the US, but globally, in every country where Meghan generates significant interest. But what's really interesting isn't just the volume. It's what kind of content people were creating. TikTok creators started making side-by-side comparison videos, showing clips from the South Park episode next to actual footage from Meghan's interviews and public appearances. Not to prove anything definitive, but to show why the parody lands so effectively. These videos have collectively generated millions of views, reaching way beyond South Park's core audience into mainstream consciousness. On Twitter, the conversation split predictably. Some people thought it was hilarious and long overdue, others thought it was cruel and unfair. But there was also a surprisingly large group in the middle who seemed genuinely conflicted, saying things like, "I never thought about it this way before, but now I can't unsee it." That's the power of effective satire. It doesn't just mock, it reframes. It gives people a new lens for viewing something they thought they already understood. And once that reframing happens, it's almost impossible to go back. Perhaps most telling is who's been quiet. Some media figures who've been vocally supportive of Meghan in the past have been noticeably silent about this episode. Not everyone, but enough that people have started commenting on the absence itself. When your allies go quiet, that often sends a stronger message than what your critics are saying out loud. Here's what makes this episode potentially devastating in the long term. South Park isn't just mocking one video or one moment. They're connecting dots that people have been noticing independently for years. The episode reportedly references various past controversies. Reports of high staff turnover. Rumors about NDAs for household employees. Contradictions between different interviews where the same stories get told with slightly different details. The famous privacy tour that South Park previously mocked, where someone who claims to want privacy keeps doing very public media appearances. Individually, any of these could be explained away. But when you line them all up, when you present them as a pattern rather than isolated incidents, a different picture emerges. And that's what South Park has apparently done. They've taken years of scattered observations and woven them into a coherent narrative about image control and manufactured authenticity. One media analyst put it perfectly. South Park didn't invent these criticisms. Every point they're making has been made before. What they did was package it all together in a way that's entertaining, memorable, and impossible to ignore. There's reportedly a sequence where the Meghan character is constantly on the phone with lawyers, frantically threatening legal action every time someone questions her narrative or uses words like inauthentic. This satirizes something that's been a recurring theme in media coverage: the reported legal letters and attempts to control coverage through legal pressure. The episode apparently builds all of this to a final climax that viewers say perfectly captures the central contradiction, the most devastating scene. According to detailed viewer descriptions, the episode's most impactful moment comes near the end. The Meghan character has spent the entire runtime micromanaging her authentic documentary, and the South Park kids finally start questioning the contradictions. Her response is to launch into a dramatic speech about being silenced, about not being heard, about having her voice suppressed. Which would be powerful, except she's delivering this monologue while standing center stage with multiple spotlights on her, professional sound equipment capturing every word, and a film crew documenting everything. The irony is immediate and visual. She's talking about being silenced while having the largest possible platform, complaining about not being heard while everyone is listening with professional recording equipment. As the speech continues, the camera pulls back to reveal increasingly elaborate production elements. A live orchestra playing emotional background music. More spotlights. The stage getting bigger. All while she continues, talking about how no one ever lets her speak. Stan, being the voice of reason, finally interrupts to point out the obvious contradiction. And that's when the character reportedly breaks the fourth wall, turns directly to the camera, and delivers what viewers say is the single most cutting line in the entire episode. You don't understand. I have to control the narrative because that's the only way I can be authentically me. Think about that line for a second. It uses the language of authenticity while simultaneously admitting to calculated narrative control. It acknowledges the contradiction while defending it as necessary. It's the paradox made explicit. That's brilliant satire. Because it takes Meghan's own rhetoric about being her authentic self and living her truth, and turns it inside out to expose what critics see as the fundamental contradiction. You can't authentically control how authentic you appear. The act of managing perception inherently undermines the authenticity you're trying to project. The Hollywood ripple effect. This is where the story potentially moves from celebrity controversy into something with real consequences. Multiple sources in the entertainment industry have suggested there's a noticeable shift in how Hollywood views Meghan and Harry as business partners. One producer, speaking anonymously to an industry podcast, said, "There's a difference between being controversial and becoming radioactive. Controversial generates buzz. Radioactive makes executives nervous." The implication being that this South Park episode might be pushing Meghan from the first category into the second. Rumors are circulating that several studios and streaming platforms are quietly re-evaluating projects with the couple. Not canceling anything outright, but taking a more cautious approach, doing more research on whether public perception has shifted enough to affect viewership. Netflix, which signed a massive deal with them, has reportedly been monitoring social media sentiment very closely. No official statements have been made, and honestly, I wouldn't expect any. This is the kind of thing that happens behind closed doors in executive meetings. But the fact that these rumors are circulating at all suggests there's at least some level of concern about what this episode represents. One media analyst explained it this way: when South Park successfully defines someone in the public imagination, it creates what we call sticky perception. It doesn't matter if the portrayal is entirely fair. What matters is that it gives people a framework for understanding that person. And once that framework is established, it's incredibly difficult to change. Let me step back for a moment and talk about why this particular issue has become such a cultural flashpoint. We're living in this bizarre era where everyone is expected to share their authentic self online, while also understanding that everything they share is being evaluated and commodified. Authenticity itself has become a performance, something you do for an audience, rather than something you simply are. Celebrities face an extreme version of this. Their careers depend on public interest, but we also expect them to be real and relatable. We want authentic connection, but we're highly attuned to any signs of calculation. Meghan built her entire brand around authenticity, realness, and genuine connection. She talks about living her truth, being her authentic self, speaking her story in her own words. That's the foundation of her public appeal. But here's the problem. The moment people start seeing signs of calculation, noticing production value in supposedly candid moments or contradictions in the narrative, the entire foundation collapses. Because you can't be strategically authentic. It's a logical impossibility. This is what South Park is drilling down on. Not whether Meghan is good or bad, not whether her royal family criticisms are justified, but whether the entire premise of her public image can survive scrutiny. One psychology professor who studies celebrity culture said something interesting. We're more forgiving of celebrities who are upfront about performing. We understand Kim Kardashian is selling a curated version of her life, and we're okay with it because there's no pretense. But when someone builds their brand on being unfiltered and real, we hold them to a different standard. When that standard isn't met, the backlash is proportionally more severe. That might explain why this episode has generated such intense reaction. It's not just mocking a celebrity. It's exposing what many see as fundamental dishonesty in how someone presents themselves. What happens next? So where does this leave us? Most crisis management experts agree on one thing. The worst response would be to engage directly or pursue legal action. That would only reinforce what the episode satirizes. The recommended strategy is strategic withdrawal. Fewer appearances, no major interviews. Let the controversy fade, then come back with actions rather than words, demonstrating the qualities you've been accused of lacking. But according to sources close to the situation, Meghan sees this portrayal as fundamentally unfair and misleading. There's apparently a strong feeling that this shouldn't be allowed to stand without response. The irony, of course, is that being visibly upset about an unfair portrayal makes the portrayal seem more accurate. If the satire is about someone who needs to control their image and can't handle criticism, getting angry about it reinforces the very thing being criticized. It's a no-win situation, which is probably exactly what South Park intended. The power of satire. Stepping back from the immediate drama, this episode represents something larger about how satire functions in our culture. South Park has been doing this for over 25 years. They target politicians, religious figures, celebrities, and social movements. What they do most effectively is identify contradictions that people have noticed but haven't articulated. When that satire lands, when it resonates with large numbers of people, it's usually touching on something that feels true, even if the specific details are wildly exaggerated. The exaggeration is the point. It makes the contradiction so obvious, so visual, so impossible to ignore, that people can't unsee it afterward. Whether the portrayal of Meghan in this episode is entirely fair almost doesn't matter now. What matters is that millions of people have seen a satirical version that articulates criticisms they may have already been thinking. And once that version exists in cultural consciousness, it becomes part of how she's perceived going forward. This is the power and danger of effective satire. It can reshape public perception in ways that are incredibly difficult to reverse, regardless of accuracy. At the end of the day, we're talking about a cartoon. South Park isn't a news source. It's not a documentary, and it's not trying to be fair or balanced. But the reason this episode has generated so much conversation is because it's tapped into something real. Whether you think the criticism is fair or not, whether you support Meghan or not, you can't deny that the questions South Park is raising about authenticity and image control resonate with a lot of people. The conversation about manufactured authenticity, about the gap between public image and private reality, about whether it's possible to be genuinely genuine when everything you do is for public consumption, these are real questions worth discussing. South Park just gave us a framework, however exaggerated, for having that discussion. As for what happens next with Meghan's career and public image, that remains to be seen. Maybe this blows over in a few weeks. Maybe it represents a genuine turning point. Only time will tell. But one thing is certain. This episode has become part of the conversation now. It's given people a vocabulary and visual reference for discussing something they've been feeling but couldn't express. And that's not something that disappears just because the news cycle moves on. South Park has done what it does best. They've made us laugh, made us uncomfortable, and made us think about things we'd rather not examine too closely. Whether you think they went too far or not, they've certainly made an impact. And for Meghan Markle, navigating the aftermath of becoming a South Park punchline might prove to be her biggest challenge yet, in a public life that's been full of challenges from the very beginning.